Deep beneath the dying surface of Talar Fur, the last children of the Crystal Folk sang their final song. Their voices, once powerful enough to shape mountains and call rain from empty skies, now whispered like broken wind chimes in the darkness. Elder Keeper Moran pressed his ancient hand against the cold stone wall and felt the tremors above. The Devourers were still feeding. For 3 months, his people had hidden in these caves while their beautiful world died. The crystal cities that had stood for 10,000 years were gone, consumed and processed into gray paste that fed the endless hunger of the swarm. The singing forests where young Talari learned to harmonize with nature had been stripped bare. Even the great resonance chambers where their ancestors had first learned to speak with the stars lay in ruins. Moran walked through the narrow tunnels where his people waited to die. Once, there had been millions of them. Now, barely 300 remained. Their crystal bodies, normally bright with inner light, had grown dim with despair. The youngest ones no longer asked when they could return to the surface. They had learned not to hope. In the deepest chamber, the old quantum beacon still worked. Moran had saved power for weeks, stealing energy from their dying life support systems. His advisors thought him foolish. Who would answer a call from a dying world? The great alliance of species that had once protected this region of space had fallen silent years ago, consumed one by the swarm that ate everything in its path. But Moran had heard stories. Traders spoke of a small blue world far from the galactic center, inhabited by strange creatures that walked on 2 legs and refused to accept defeat. They called themselves humans, and even the most hardened space merchants seemed nervous when they spoke of them. There were tales of human ships appearing in lost battles, of settlements that fought impossible odds, of a species that seemed to grow stronger when things looked hopeless. Most dismissed these stories as myths, but Moran was desperate enough to believe in myths. He activated the beacon with shaking hands. The device hummed to life, its quantum transmitter reaching across the vast emptiness between stars. In the human tongue that he had learned from trader recordings, he began to speak. "This is Elder Keeper Moran of the Talari people," he said, his harmonic voice translated into crude human sounds. "Our world dies. Our children sing no more. The Devourers have come, and we cannot stop them. We are 300 souls hiding in darkness, while our home becomes ash above us. If there is mercy in the void, if there are those who would answer the call of the dying, please hear us. We do not ask you to save us. We ask only that you remember we existed, that we loved our world and tried to protect it, that we sang beautiful songs before the silence came." The message repeated automatically, broadcast into the endless night. Moran did not expect an answer. He simply hoped that somewhere, someone would hear their last words and know that the Talari had been more than just another meal for the swarm. Above them, the ground shook as massive processing machines stripped away another mountain. The Devourers worked without rest, their bioships hanging in the sky like diseased organs while their ground forms moved in perfect synchronization. They had no individual thoughts, no personal desires. They existed only to consume, to process, to feed the ever-growing mass of their collective consciousness. Moran had seen worlds die before. The pattern was always the same. First came the scout ships, studying defenses and cataloging resources. Then the main fleet arrived, overwhelming any resistance with sheer numbers. Finally came the processing phase, where everything organic was consumed and everything else was broken down into useful materials. Within a year, a thriving world became a lifeless rock, stripped of everything valuable. The Talari had tried to fight. Their crystal technology could create beautiful harmonies and reshape matter with pure sound, but it was not built for war. Their defensive songs had barely slowed the swarm down. Their great resonance weapons had destroyed dozens of enemy ships, before being overwhelmed by thousands more. Now Moran led his people in their final days, keeping them calm while death worked above their heads. He told them stories of the old times, sang the ancient melodies, and pretended he believed they might somehow survive. It was all he could do. The quantum beacon continued its transmission, sending their desperate message into the darkness. Light years. Away from their dying world, the signal raced through hyperspace toward a small blue planet where strange creatures had just learned to reach the stars. Moran did not know that on Earth, radio telescopes were already detecting his signal. He did not know that in Australia, a young scientist named Amy Reeves was working through the night to decode his words. He did not know that across his target world, military leaders were gathering to discuss the impossible, launching humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. All he knew was that his people were dying, and he had done everything he could to make sure they were not forgotten. In the tunnels around him, the Talari continued their quiet songs. Not the great harmonies of their golden age, but simple melodies of memory and love. Songs about crystal cities that caught the morning light, about forests that sang back when you called to them, about children learning to shape stone with their voices. The songs grew softer as exhaustion claimed more voices. Their life support systems were failing, the air growing thin and cold. Soon, even these hidden chambers would be found and consumed. The swarm always found everything eventually, but still the beacon transmitted, carrying Moran's voice across the galaxy toward Earth. The message was simple and desperate and true. We are dying. Our children sing no more. If there is mercy in the void, let someone answer. Above them, the devourers continued their feast, unaware that they had just made the worst mistake in their species' history. They had threatened something that humanity would not allow to die alone. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, ships were already being prepared for the longest journey in human history. Amy Reeves had not slept in 36 hours. Coffee cups covered her desk at the Deep Space Communication Array like small monuments to her growing desperation. The alien signal had been repeating for 2 days now, and she was finally beginning to understand what it meant. The language was unlike anything in Earth's databases. It used harmonic frequencies that suggested the speakers might communicate through sound in ways humans never imagined. But Amy had spent her life studying how different species might talk to each other across the stars, and she knew desperation when she heard it. The breakthrough came when she realized the speaker was using human language badly, like someone who had learned it from old recordings without understanding the grammar. Once she corrected for that, the message became terrifyingly clear. "My God," she whispered, staring at her translation. "They're dying." Within an hour, her report was racing up the chain of command. The Australian government contacted the United Nations. The UN contacted every major space agency and military organization on Earth. By evening, world leaders were gathering for an emergency session that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The debate in the UN Assembly Hall was fierce but brief. Some delegates worried about the cost of an interstellar mission. Others questioned whether they could trust an alien message. A few wondered if this might be some kind of trap. President Chen of the Pacific Alliance ended the argument with words that would be remembered for centuries. 47 light-years away, children are dying in caves while monsters eat their world. Anyone who thinks we shouldn't help can explain that to their own children. The vote was unanimous. Tom Bradley had been preparing for this moment his entire life without knowing it. As commander of the UES Defiant, humanity's first and only interstellar vessel, he had spent 3 years exploring the outer edges of the solar system. His ship was designed for long-range exploration, not war, but it was the fastest thing humans had ever built. When Admiral Grace Holt called him to Earth Fleet Command, he knew something extraordinary was happening. What he didn't expect was to be offered command of humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. "The aliens are 47 light-years away," Admiral Holt explained, her weathered face serious in the dim briefing room. "Even with our best FTL drives, it'll take 2 years to get there. By the time we arrive, they may all be dead." "But we're going anyway," Tom said. It wasn't a question. "We're going anyway," she confirmed. "The question is whether you're willing to lead the mission." Tom looked at the star chart spread across the table, showing the route to Talar 4. 2 years in deep space, facing an enemy that had already destroyed an entire civilization. Most of his crew would probably not survive. "When do we leave?" he asked. The next 3 weeks saw the greatest mobilization in human history. Every nation contributed ships, weapons, and personnel. The Defiant was joined by 11 other vessels hastily converted for war. The battleship Retribution received new armor and the most powerful weapons Earth could build. The Guardian loaded with medical supplies and refugee facilities. 9 support ships carried everything from spare parts to frozen food for the journey ahead. News of the mission leaked to the public on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday evening, recruitment centers around the world were overwhelmed with volunteers. People who had never seen combat wanted to serve on the mission. Veterans came out of retirement. Even criminals requested transfers from prison to the military if it meant they could help save an alien species. Dr. Nina Cross was working in a biology lab in Geneva when she saw the news. She had spent her career studying theoretical alien life, never expecting to encounter the real thing. When she volunteered for the mission, she expected to be turned down. Instead, she found herself appointed as the fleet's chief xenobiologist within 48 hours. "You understand," Admiral Holt told her during the brief interview. "You'll be studying hostile alien life forms, the things that are killing the Talari." "Good," Nina replied. "Then I'll know how to kill them back." Major Rick Davis was training new recruits in Scotland when he got the call. 8,000 Marines would accompany the fleet, ready for ground combat on an alien world. Rick had served in 3 Earth wars and thought he understood violence. But preparing to fight creatures that consumed entire planets was different from anything he had imagined. His soldiers came from every country on Earth. Former enemies trained together, united by a single purpose. They didn't know what they would face on Taylor 4, but they spent months learning everything they could about alien biology and adapting their weapons for use in unknown environments. Lisa Stone had been flying experimental fighters for the Earth Defense Force when she volunteered. For the mission, she led a squadron of 60 pilots who would provide air support during the ground assault. They practiced combat maneuvers in deep space, learning to fight in zero gravity and alien atmospheres. "We don't know what their ships look like," she told her pilots during training. "We don't know how they fight. All we know is that they've been winning for a long time. That's about to change." The fleet launched on a gray morning in December, under skies heavy with winter clouds. Crowds gathered at spaceports around the world to watch the ships disappear into the darkness between stars. Many people wept, knowing they might never see these brave crews again. As the 12 human ships accelerated past the edge of the solar system, Tom Bradley sent a message back to Talar 4 using the same quantum frequencies the Talari had used. His words were simple: "Hold on, the cavalry is coming." The response came 3 days later, translated by Amy Reeves, who had joined the mission as their communications specialist. Elder Keeper Moran's voice was weak but filled with wonder. "You heard us. Across the void, someone heard us." "We hear you," Tom replied. "We're coming. Just hold on a little longer." But even as he sent the message, he knew that 2 years was a long time. The Talari were already dying when they sent their first call for help. How many would survive until the human fleet arrived? How many children would sing their last songs in the caves of a dying world? Behind them, Earth continued to prepare. More ships were being built, more weapons designed, more soldiers trained. If this mission failed, there would be another. And another. Humanity had made a promise to the stars, and they intended to keep it. In the depths of space, The 12 ships of humanity's first interstellar war fleet raced toward a battle that would define their species' future. They carried the hopes and prayers of an entire world, along with a simple message that would echo across the galaxy. Nobody dies alone. The human fleet had been traveling through hyperspace for 18 months when Dr. Nina Cross made a discovery that changed everything. In her small laboratory aboard the Guardian, she studied every piece of data the Talari had sent about their attackers. What she found made her hands shake as she called Captain Bradley. "Tom, you need to see this," she said over the communication link. "The Devourer swarm isn't just another aggressive species. There's something much worse." The captain arrived at her lab within minutes, followed by Admiral Holt and Major Davis. Nina's screens showed biological readings that looked like nothing they had ever seen. The data revealed creatures that were part machine, part living tissue, all connected by a single massive consciousness that spanned across thousands of individual bodies. "They don't think like us," Nina explained, pointing to the biorhythms on her monitor. "There's no individual decision-making, no personal survival instinct. They exist only to consume organic matter and convert it into more of themselves. They've probably been doing this for millions of years, moving from system to system like a disease." Admiral Holt studied the readings with the calm expression she wore in every crisis. "How do we kill something like that?" "I don't know yet," Nina admitted, "but I'm working on it." The journey gave them time to prepare, but it also gave them time to worry. Every month brought weaker signals from Talar Fu. Elder Keeper Mor-An's transmissions grew shorter and more desperate. The Talari population had dropped from 300 to fewer than 100 survivors. Lisa Stone spent her days training her pilot squadron in the zero-gravity combat chambers, preparing for dogfights in alien skies. Her pilots came from 12 different countries, but they had become something new during the long journey. Humanity's first interstellar air force. "Remember," she told them during one training session, "we don't know how their ships move or what weapons they use. We'll have to adapt fast when we get there. The only advantage we have is that they've never fought humans before." Major Davis trained his Marines in the ship's combat simulators, running them through every possible scenario Nina's research suggested they might face. The ground assault would be the most dangerous part of the mission. They would have to fight their way through unknown terrain to reach the Talari survivors hiding deep underground. "These things have consumed entire worlds," he reminded his troops. "They know how to kill, but they don't know how humans fight when we're protecting someone else's children." 2 years after leaving Earth, the human fleet finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Talar system. What they saw through the viewports made even the most hardened soldiers fall silent. Talar 4 hung in space like a wounded animal. The planet's surface, once covered in crystal cities and singing forests, had been transformed into a gray wasteland dotted with massive organic structures that pulsed like living hearts. Swarm bioships filled the space around the planet. Thousands of them, each the size of a human battleship, but shaped like twisted insects crossed with mechanical spiders. "Jesus!" whispered Lieutenant Kate Williams from the bridge of the Defiant. "How many are there?" "Sensors show approximately 3,000 enemy vessels," reported the navigation officer. "They're concentrated around the planet's major landmasses. Captain Bradley opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is what we came to stop," he said. "I know it looks impossible. But down there in the caves, people are dying while waiting for us to do the impossible. So that's what we're going to do." The first contact with the surviving Talari came through the quantum communicator. Mor-An's voice was so weak they could barely hear him, but the joy in his harmonic tones needed no translation. "You came," he whispered. "Across the void and through the years, you actually came." Amy Reeves, now serving as the fleet's communications specialist, wiped tears from her eyes as she translated the response. "We promised we would," she said into the transmitter. How many of you are left? 73, came the reply. 73 souls in the deep places, singing quiet songs so the monsters cannot hear us. Captain Bradley took the communicator from Amy. Keep her more on. This is Captain Tom Bradley of the Earth Fleet. We're here to get you out of there. But we need your help. Can you tell us about the enemy's weaknesses? The response took several minutes. When it came, Moran's voice carried the weight of months spent watching his people die. They are one mind in many bodies. They coordinate perfectly but cannot think as individuals. They have never faced an enemy that fights with, chaos. Dr. Cross looked up from her scanner readings with sudden understanding. That's it. That's how we beat them. They're used to fighting species that organize like they do. Perfect coordination, predictable tactics. They won't know how to handle human unpredictability. Admiral Holt nodded grimly. Then we give them chaos. The plan they developed over the next 6 hours was insane by military standards. Instead of a coordinated assault, each human unit would operate independently. The fighter squadrons would attack in random patterns. The ground forces would use guerrilla tactics. The capital ships would ignore formation discipline and fight like individuals. It goes against everything we've learned about space combat, Admiral Holt admitted to her senior officers. But these things have spent millions of years learning to counter organized resistance. Let's see how they handle complete disorder. As the human fleet prepared for battle, Captain Bradley sent one final message to the Talari survivors. Keep her more on. We're about to start the fight. Whatever happens, know that Earth heard your call. Your people will be remembered. The reply came back in perfect, careful human speech. Captain Bradley, your species has traveled farther than any has traveled to answer our call for help. If we die today, we die knowing we are not alone. If we live because of your courage. Either way, the songs of our people will remember Earth forever. Lisa Stone strapped herself into her fighter's cockpit and looked out at the swarm of enemy bioships surrounding Talar 4. Her squadron was outnumbered 50-1, facing creatures designed by millions of years of evolution to kill and consume. The smart thing would be to retreat and call for reinforcements, but there were 73 people hiding in caves below, waiting for someone to care enough about their lives to risk everything. All squadrons. This is Stone, she broadcast to her pilots. Remember why we're here. Those things down there eat children and call it progress. Time to show them what happens when they pick on the wrong species. The battle for Talar 4 was about to begin, and across the human fleet, 8,000 soldiers prepared to do what humans did best. Protect those who could not protect themselves, no matter the odds. The first thing the Devourer swarm learned about humans was that they did not behave like other species. When Lisa Stone led her fighter squadron against the enemy bioship surrounding Talar 4, she did something no military computer could have. Predicted, she ordered her pilots to split up and attack in completely random directions. The swarm's collective intelligence, which had coordinated the consumption of 47 worlds, suddenly found itself trying to track 60 individual human fighters moving in patterns that made no tactical sense. Where other species attacked in formations that could be predicted and countered, the humans flew like they were each fighting their own personal war. Lieutenant Mike Roberts broke from his squadron and dove straight down at a cluster of bioships, firing wildly while screaming an ancient Celtic battle cry. His fighter took heavy damage, but his unpredictable attack confused the enemy long enough for 3 other human pilots to destroy a command vessel that had been coordinating local defenses. "This is insane," Roberts reported over the radio, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. But it's working. The swarm had evolved to counter organized resistance. Their bioships moved in perfect harmony, responding to threats with calculated precision. But they had no experience with pilots who attacked from impossible angles while singing old rock songs at the top of their lungs. On the surface of Talar, IV, Major Davis led the first wave of human Marines down to the planet in assault shuttles that dodged through the chaos of the space battle above. Their target was the primary processing facility, where the swarm was converting Talari organic matter into more bioships. The shuttles landed hard on the gray wasteland that had once been a crystal city. As the Marines poured out, they faced their first sight of Devourer ground forces, massive insectoid creatures with too many legs and weapons that fired streams of digestive acid. "They're bigger than the intelligence report suggested," reported Sergeant Beth Cooper, her rifle already, firing at the approaching monsters. "Then we'll need bigger bullets," Davis replied, launching a rocket-propelled grenade into the center of a swarm formation. What followed was the kind of ground combat that the Devourer swarm had never encountered in millions of years of conquest. The human Marines didn't advance in orderly lines or fall back in organized retreats. They fought like wolves, individually vicious but somehow coordinated in ways the swarm's collective mind couldn't understand. Corporal Jim Watson found himself separated from his unit and surrounded by 6 swarm creatures. Instead of surrendering or trying to rejoin his squad, he climbed onto the back of one of the monsters and started shooting the others while riding it like some kind of nightmarish horse. His actions made no tactical sense, but they worked. "Watson, what the hell are you doing?" Davis shouted over the radio. "Fighting dirty, sir," Watson replied, jumping clear as his unwilling mount collapsed. "These things don't know how to handle dirty fighting." Above them, the space battle raged with equal chaos. Captain Bradley had ordered the human fleet to abandon all standard formations and engage the enemy however they saw fit. The result was a battle that looked less like organized warfare and more like a massive bar fight involving spaceships. The Guardian, loaded with medical supplies instead of heavy weapons, found itself facing down 3 swarm bioships. Instead of retreating, Captain Sarah Kim ordered her crew to ram the first enemy vessel while broadcasting human music at maximum volume across all frequencies. "If we're going to die," she announced over the ship's intercom, "let's make sure these things remember what humans sound like." The Guardian's sacrifice destroyed 2 enemy ships and damaged a third so badly it withdrew from the battle. But more importantly, it demonstrated something the swarm had never seen. A species willing to die not for territory or resources, but for the abstract concept of protecting others. Dr. Nina Cross, working frantically in her laboratory aboard the Defiant, finally found what she had been searching for. The bio readings from captured swarm tissue revealed a critical weakness. The creature's collective consciousness depended on quantum-entangled neural networks that could be disrupted by specific harmonic frequencies. "Tom, I've got it," she called to the bridge. The Talari were right about harmonic weapons being effective, but they were using the wrong frequency. If we can broadcast at the exact resonance of their neural networks, we can break their coordination. Captain Bradley's reply came through the sound of weapons fire as the Defiant exchanged salvos with a massive bioship. "How do we generate the right frequency?" "We need the Talari. Their harmonic abilities are the only thing that can produce the exact tone we need." The problem was that Elder Keeper Moran and his people were trapped in caves deep beneath the planet's surface, while the entrance to their hiding place was guarded by hundreds of swarm ground forces. Getting to them would require a mission. That was suicidal even by human standards. "I'll do it," Major Davis announced when the plan was explained to the ground forces. "Give me 20 volunteers and we'll clear a path to the Talari." "Rick, that's a death sentence," Captain Bradley replied from orbit. "There are too many of them." "Maybe," Davis admitted. "But there are 73 people down here who've been waiting 2 years for rescue. I didn't come 47 light." Years to tell them we tried our best. The assault on the cave entrance became legendary among human military forces. Davis and his 20 volunteers fought through 3 miles of swarm-controlled territory, using every dirty trick they could think of. They used enemy bioacid as improvised explosives. They turned captured swarm creatures against each other by jamming their communication frequencies. They fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive savagery that left the enemy completely confused. Lieutenant Ann Foster carried a flamethrower that had been modified to burn through swarm bioarmor. When she ran out of fuel, she switched to her sidearm. When she ran out of ammunition, she used her combat knife. When her knife broke, she picked up a piece of broken crystal and kept fighting. "These things might eat worlds," she said, blood streaming down her face as she stabbed another enemy creature. "But they've never met anyone from Detroit." Somehow, impossibly, the 21 humans fought their way to the cave entrance where the Talari survivors had been hiding for months. When the first human marine stumbled into their underground sanctuary, the crystalline beings thought they were hallucinations brought on by starvation and despair. Elder Keeper Moran approached Major Davis with trembling hands, his voice barely a whisper. "You are real. You came for us." "We promised we would," Davis replied, his armor battered and his weapon empty. "Now we need your help to win this thing." Nina's plan required Moran to generate a harmonic frequency that would disrupt the swarm's neural networks across the entire planet. The process would require the old Talari to use all his remaining life energy, but it would give the human fleet the chance they needed to destroy the enemy command structure. "I understand," Moran said when the plan was explained to him. "My people's song will be the last thing these creatures hear." As the battle raged above them, the last elder of the Talari began to sing. His voice, weak from months of hiding and starvation, somehow grew stronger as it resonated through the crystal formations of the cave system. The harmonic frequency spread across the planet, carried by the very stones that had once formed the great Talari cities. The effect on the swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Across the planet and in orbit above, the perfect coordination that had made them invincible suddenly collapsed. Bioships crashed into each other, ground forces turned on their own units. The collective consciousness that had consumed 47 worlds finally encountered something it could not adapt to or overcome. In the chaos that followed, the human fleet struck with everything they had. But the real victory belonged to an old alien who had used his last breath to sing a song of freedom that echoed across his dying world. Elder Keeper Moran's song shattered more than just the Devourer swarm's neural networks. It broke something fundamental in their collective consciousness that had existed for millions of years. As his harmonic frequency spread across Talar, the bioships in orbit began to convulse and twist like dying animals. Major Davis held the old Talari as his crystal body began to crack and fade. The harmonic weapon was consuming Moran's life force, but he kept singing, his voice growing stronger even as his physical form grew weaker. "Why?" Davis asked, knowing the alien was sacrificing himself. "Why not let one of us do this?" Moran's voice resonated with ancient sadness and new hope. "Because this is our world, and our children should be the last song these monsters hear. But also, because you showed us what courage looks like. Now we can be brave too. Above them, Captain." Bradley watched through the Defiant's viewports as the enemy fleet tore itself apart. Swarm bioships that had moved in perfect coordination for eons suddenly lost all sense of direction. Some crashed into the planet's surface, others collided with their own vessels. The largest command ship, a massive organic structure that had been directing the entire assault, began to shake and buckle as its neural systems failed. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel," Admiral Holt ordered from the Retribution. "This is our chance." The human fleet, battered and reduced to 8 operational ships, converged on the dying command ship like wolves attacking a wounded giant. Lisa Stone led the remaining fighter squadrons in one final assault, her pilots pushing their damaged craft beyond their design limits. "This is for every world you've destroyed," she said, launching her last missiles into the command ship's exposed core. The explosion lit up the entire system. When the light faded, the massive bioship was gone, and with it, the central intelligence that had coordinated the swarm across dozens of star systems. The remaining enemy vessels drifted like empty shells, their purpose gone, their collective will broken. In the caves beneath Talar 4, Moran's song reached its crescendo and then faded to silence. The old Talari's crystal body had become transparent, and his voice was just a whisper. "Did we win?" he asked Major Davis. "Yes," Davis replied, his voice rough with emotion. "We won. Your people are safe." Moran smiled, an expression that somehow transcended the differences between species. Then the song was worth singing. Tell your people. Tell them that the Talari remember. That across the void, someone heard our call and came to help. That Earth's children are braver than we ever dared to hope. The old Talari's body faded like morning mist, leaving only a gentle harmonic echo in the crystal walls around them. He had spent his last breath ensuring that his people would survive and that the devourer swarm would never threaten another world. The cleanup took 3 days. Human Marines cleared the remaining swarm creatures from the planet's surface while engineering teams began dismantling the bioprocessing facilities. The surviving Talari, all 47 of them, emerged from their underground hiding places to see their sky clear of enemy ships for the first time in months. Dr. Nina Cross worked with the Talari survivors to understand their biotechnology, learning how their harmonic abilities could be used to restore their world. The crystal cities were gone, but the Talari knew how to grow new ones from the resonant stones that lay beneath the surface. It will take generations, one young Talari, named Veltar, explained to Nina. But we can make our world sing again. The harmony is still here, sleeping in the deep places. Captain Bradley stood on the surface of Talar 4 and looked up at the alien stars, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. 2 years of travel, 8,000 human lives put at risk, and the resources of an entire world committed to saving a species they had never met. Amy Reeves approached him with a communication device. "Tom, we're getting messages from Earth. The whole planet wants to know what happened here." Bradley took the communicator and spoke to his home world for the first time in 2 years. "This is Captain Tom Bradley of the Earth Fleet. Mission accomplished. The Talari people are safe. The Devourer swarm has been eliminated. We're coming home." The response from Earth was immediate and overwhelming. Celebrations erupted in every major city. The success of the mission proved something that humanity had suspected but never tested. They were not alone in the universe, and they were strong enough to protect others who couldn't protect themselves. But the real victory was smaller and more personal. It came when young Veltar approached Major Davis with something that looked like a crystal flower carved from pure sound. "This is for your people," she said in her harmonic voice that Amy translated. "It is a memory crystal. It contains the last song Elder Keeper Moran sang before he joined with the harmony of all things. We want Earth to have it, so your children will know what their courage made possible." The crystal would eventually be placed in the United Nations, building in New York, where it would sing Moran's final song for anyone who wanted to hear it. But for now, it represented something simpler, proof that risking everything for strangers was not foolishness, but the highest form of courage. The human fleet's journey back to Earth took 2 years, but this time they were not traveling alone. 3 Talari volunteers came with them, eager to see the world that had produced such fierce protectors. They would serve as the first alien ambassadors to Earth, beginning a relationship that would last for centuries. As the 8 surviving human ships entered Earth's solar system, they were met by a fleet of construction vessels already heading out to Talar 4. Humanity had decided that the Talari would not rebuild their world alone. Engineers, doctors, teachers, and artists were volunteering for the long journey to help restore what the swarm had destroyed. The mission's true impact became clear in the months that followed. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy through trading networks and communication relays. Species that had lived in terror of the devourer swarm for generations suddenly learned that the unstoppable force had been stopped by creatures from a small blue world that most had never heard of. The first diplomatic contact came from the hegemony of Cathara, a collection of worlds that had been preparing for the swarm's eventual arrival for decades. Their message was simple. We wish to meet the humans who ended the darkness. Within a year, Earth had received contact requests from 17 different species. Some wanted to establish trade relationships. Others offered technological exchanges. But most simply wanted to thank humanity for doing what no one else had been willing to attempt, traveling across the galaxy to save complete strangers. Captain Bradley, now promoted to Admiral, found himself commanding humanity's rapidly expanding interstellar fleet. The lessons learned during the Talar Fafor mission had taught human military planners valuable truths about space combat. Earth's chaotic fighting style, which had seemed like a desperate improvisation, proved to be devastatingly effective against enemies that relied on predictable coordination. Major Davis, scarred but alive, established the first human interstellar Marine Corps. His training manual, which emphasized adaptability and individual initiative over rigid formations, became the standard for Earth's growing military presence in space. The section titled Fighting Dirty in Deep Space was translated into dozens of alien languages and studied by military tacticians across the galaxy. Lisa Stone returned to Earth as humanity's most decorated fighter pilot, but she didn't stay long. Within 6 months, she was leading the first joint human-alien squadron, teaching other species how to fight with the unpredictability that had broken the swarm's perfect coordination. Dr. Nina Cross established the Xenobiology Institute in Geneva, where she continued studying alien life forms, not to understand how to kill them, but to learn how different species could work together. Her research into harmonic frequencies led to breakthroughs in interstellar communication that made real-time conversations possible across vast distances. Amy Reeves became Earth's first interstellar communications director, working with alien linguists to establish universal translation protocols. But she never forgot the desperate message that had started it all, and she made sure that Earth's deep space monitoring stations were always listening for new calls for help. The Talari rebuilt their world, but it was different now. The new Crystal Cities incorporated human architectural ideas, creating structures that sang with alien harmonies but looked unmistakably influenced by Earth design. Streets that had once been perfectly circular now curved in patterns that reminded visitors of human settlements. Veltar, who had become the youngest elder keeper in Talari history, established the first interspecies university on the rebuilt world. Students from dozens of planets came to study the harmonics that had defeated the swarm, but they also learned about human concepts like individual courage and protective sacrifice. The humans taught us something our people had forgotten, she explained to a gathering of galactic ambassadors. That being willing to die for others makes you stronger than any enemy. That caring about strangers is not weakness, but the greatest strength any species can possess. The memory crystal containing Mor-An's final song became more than just a monument in the UN building. Copies were made and distributed to every human settlement, every Earth ship, every diplomatic mission. When new crews shipped out for dangerous assignments in deep space, they carried Mor-An's song with them as a reminder of why they risked everything for people they had never met. But the real legacy of the Talar 4 mission was simpler and more profound. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in isolation for millennia began to reach out to each other. The human example had shown them that the universe didn't have to be a place where everyone fought alone. 10 years after the mission, Admiral Bradley stood on the observation deck of the New Earth Space Command Station orbiting Mars. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from a dozen. Different worlds docked at the facility. Humans worked alongside Talari engineers, Catharan scientists, and representatives from species whose names he was still learning to pronounce. Amy Reeves joined him at the window, carrying a data pad filled with the day's communications traffic. "We got another one today," she said. "A species called the Morvani, about 60 light years from here. They're being attacked by something called the Crimson Fleet." "How many ships do they need?" Bradley asked without hesitation. They didn't ask for ships. They just asked if Earth would remember them when they're gone. Amy smiled and handed him the data pad. "I already told them that Earth doesn't let anyone face the dark alone." Bradley nodded and began reviewing the tactical information. Somewhere across the galaxy, people were dying while they waited for help that might never come. But they had sent their message into the void anyway, hoping that someone would hear and care enough to answer. They were about to learn what the Devourer swarm had learned too late, that in a universe full of predators and prey, there was now a third option. There was a species that came when you called for help, that fought harder when the odds were impossible, that traveled farther, to protect strangers than most traveled to protect themselves. As the newest human fleet prepared for departure, carrying volunteers from 6 different species and weapons designed by the combined knowledge of a dozen worlds, Admiral Bradley sent a message that would become humanity's standard response to any call for help. "This is Earth Command. We hear your call. We are coming. Hold on." In the deep places of space, where light traveled for years between stars and civilizations rose and fell in cosmic silence, a new sound had begun to echo. It was the sound of species that refused to let each other die alone, of courage that crossed impossible distances, of hope that answered desperation with a simple promise. Nobody fights alone anymore. The war cry of Earth echoed on, carried by ships that bore the flags of many worlds but shared a single purpose, ensuring that no call for help would ever go unanswered again.